I'm happy to introduce Tobia Bezzola. Most of you know Tobia. He is currently still, and just for 1 week, the director of Museo d'Arte della Svizzera Italiana, the Masi in Lugano. Before he was the director in Folkwang and put that museum to another level. And before that he was, and that's why we know him so well, he was working at the Kunsthaus Zurich, where he did a lot of memorable shows. He's one of these curators, directors and art historians and philosophers who have a very broad knowledge about art, but also step out and bring in new perspectives, leave the comfort zone. And I'm always trying to think that it's a bit of a Swiss tradition, because with Hans Ulrich he's doing the same, Philippe is doing the same, Koyo did the same, Beecher does the same, Jacqueline does the same. So I always try to think has to do with Switzerland, but maybe it's just an illusion. But the important part of it is that it brings in new perspectives. It brings different ways to look at things, and as Koyo said, it is expanding ideas and horizon, and that's all, that's all E.A.T is about. If you want to see his latest show, you should go to St. Moritz, where he just curated a show at Hauser and Wirth Gallery. It's open until March 28th. And it's about Alberto Giacometti and his interest in faces and landscape, specifically about this region, about the Engadin, the Bregaglia. And in this, if you go online, there's this beautiful quote of Alberto Giacometti. He says, he's writing to his wife in '46, saying, "It was very cold in St. Moritz, colder than in Maloja. Here it is much brighter than in Stampa, which is the first thing that stands out." And I couldn't agree more. Whenever I come up here, I actually come up here to see the light. And then there's a second thing. I haven't seen the show yet, but I went online. And there's this one painting, Monte del Forno from '23. I think tomorrow I have to go see it. That's the way when you're passionate about art, you just go for one piece that you want absolutely see. You travel to a place because it's probably gonna make you, or at least me, happy. Maybe because of complexity, as Emily explained. So please give a warm welcome to Tobia, and
Thank you very much, Daniel. Good morning, everybody. So thank you for the invitation. First, I thought it would be good also to have some kind of interest in regions, in peripheral regions, since we're here not in London or in Paris or in Zurich, but we're in a landscape which has its own traditions. And but then they told me I should not talk about Engadin and Giacometti, which is absolutely fine. So it occurred to me that actually the region where I've been working and living in for the last 8 years now has a very particular and peculiar interest. History. Because a region like the Italian part of Switzerland does not take part in the mainstream of European or even Swiss art history in these times. So it occurred to me that somehow as a compensation, there is a very peculiar phenomenon that we find there, which connects nicely, I think, to the topic here, because it's about how bonds are shaped, how communication is made possible, and we will actually, a bit like Jan did, talk about buildings and houses. We will not talk about artist houses, because, of course, thinking of territorial history, the smallest unit that you find, you can speak about European art history, French art history, Swiss art history, Grison art history, and when you narrow it down, like zooming in, you end up in a building. So the smallest unit presumably would be a house. And the one that comes to mind, as a matter of fact, is the classical type of the artist house. We have many famous examples of artists who transformed their dwelling, the place where they lived and worked, into a special place, which was somehow congenial to their artistic practice. Now, today we're going to talk about exactly the contrary. We're going to look about creativity taking place in a house, inside a single building, but this single building not being taken into possession by one single person, as famously, you know, some of these have been musealized already. You may have visited them. There are many other important examples, and this is an important topic. But we have another type in European art history, when one single house actually becomes like the nucleus, the core of an artist's colony. And when you look into history, the example you will be given when you're interested, what is the first artist's colony in Europe? We know the famous one, Barbizon, Pont-Aven, etc. And we end up near Rome. We end up in Olevano Romano, in Lazio, in the Casabaldi. Now, you know that at the beginning of the 19th century, Rome is a mandatory stop for any European painter. You have to go to Rome. So we find colonies of French artists, German artists, British artists, and they all have their quarters. They have their hotels where they stay. They have their artist supplier that they use. And what's peculiar is outside Rome, because Rome on one hand gets too expensive, and then also the painting of the landscape gets crucial. So at a certain point, this Casabaldi, which is basically an inn. It's an inn in Olevano Romano, which is 40 miles outside of Rome, to the east, becomes like suddenly the hub and the center where hundreds, or we could say virtually hundreds of European artists meet. And the interesting thing is because when they were in Rome, they kept to themselves. So the French would be in the French colony, the German would be with the German, the Danish would stick to the Danish, and so on. And going there, of course, everybody stayed together, and thus this particular place arguably also had somewhat an impact on history of European painting. You see the Casabaldi here in an early 20th century photograph. This is the Borgo, the little town where it's located. So some of you may know Casabaldi. It's part of the German Institute in Rome of Villa Massimo. You can get a residency. You can apply for a residency there. It's beautifully located, and it's being used now by art historians and by artists. So it's a borsa di studio dell'Accademia Tedesca di Roma that you can apply for. So it stayed true to this tradition, which you have seen the name, brought together dozens of European painters. Some we cannot go into detail. Some art historians argue that it's really an important moment because this is where suddenly French and German and British painters would convene and work alongside. These are a few examples of works which were created by artists who stayed and worked there for some time. We have another Swiss artist, Hieronymus Hess from Basel. We jump almost a century in advance, and we move a bit north, and we are in Castel San Pietro in Ticino. And there we find this Villa Loverciana. So in 1924, we have a group of young artists from Basel who decide to form an artistic group, a movement to live and work together. I think many of you know them, especially here, because also the Kunstmuseum in Chur has an important collection of these painters. They called themselves Rot-Blau, and they're the first group and school of Swiss expressionist painting. Albert Müller, Paul Kamenisch, Hermann Scherer, Werner Neuhaus. And they convene and they create their group in this very building, in the Villa Loverciana. We even have this painting. Some argue that this depicts the moment when they, in New Year's Eve, 24-25, they meet there, they have a party, and they decide to found the group Rot-Blau, Scherer, Kamenisch, you have Sulzbachner. Later on, a few other painters came along. They famously then had an important exhibition at the Kunsthalle in Basel. This is the poster by Scherer in 1926. This show was a huge scandal at the time, quite outrageous, even if we think that being like 20 years after what Kirchner had been doing, actually there's this kind of provinzielle Stilverspätung that we always have to take into account. And we also have to take into account that artistic innovations did not travel as fast in those years as they do today. So for Basel, it was still completely unseen and unheard when they presented their work. And Kirchner also then helped them to show outside Switzerland. So you see how the region and the environment that they lived together in one house also was an important influence. There are many, many works which show us directly the building, the village, and the place where they stayed, because somehow being there, having gone there, having met there, having found this group spirit there was crucial also to their further development. We finish with La Loverciana, with this woodcut by Scherer from 26. Not far from there, a little bit to the north, we have another very peculiar and interesting case. We have the Casa di Porza. So this is founded by three artists, Arthur Brix, Alvensleben, Mario Bernasconi. Porza is a village overlooking Lugano from the hill, and they start working together there in a house in Porza. And what is peculiar, that then they have the thought, so this way of being and talking and living together should actually become the nucleus of something that we can also then send abroad. So the Porza house should be like the mothership, and they had the idea to do satellites of their community in the centers, because again, Porza is a small village. So Brix had spent some years, of course, in Ascona. He had Merefkin, he had contact with the Dadaists in Zurich, and so he was one of the key figures. Alvo von Alvensleben and Mario Bernasconi were already there, and from there they found this cultural association, Porza. Was supposed to be a supranational movement for cultural meetings and exchanges. Initially, it revolves around the idea of creating, like in Porza, a type of Porza houses, one or more houses in different countries where artists can get to know each other and work in an international network of residencies. So in 27, they arrive in Berlin, and you see, it's not in a sense, it's interesting because it's not one of the classical artistic movements. Of course, in Berlin we have the Novembergruppe, we still have the Secession, of course we have the Bauhaus people, so this classical artistic movement, it's somehow of a meta movement. They want to create spaces for exchange and communication which bring them all together. And you see Aleister Crowley, also an entirely different person, the big figure of occultism, of course, known until today in circles interested in occultism. So then in Berlin, they actually publish a magazine, Porza, in multiple languages, including Italian, in Charlottenburg, and the issue is also done in Lugano, so they keep the contact, basically, to their roots, where everything comes from, and they start to organize exhibitions, interventions, reflections, programs, and art news. In Berlin, the first exhibition is in the Grand Hotel am Knie, and you see the wide range of artists who participated. This comes from Mataré, who was the teacher of Joseph Beuys, as some of you may know. Kandinsky, we have Dungert, Kollwitz, Werefkin, Jawlensky, Muche, Vassiliev, Niemeyer-Holstein, Arthur Segal. Also, when you read the list of artists, you see also, of course, many of them also somehow connect back to Ticino because they have lived and worked there, whereas others not. They firstly connected with that world and those artistic ideas then in Berlin. This is a monographic exhibition of Werner Heuser that they did. They proudly call it the Landeszentrale für Deutschland. It was a tiny thing. And there was a Porza-Ausstellung in Frankfurt, Bild und Raum. This was more in the constructivist and abstract direction. You had Klee, Kandinsky, and Albers who participated in that. The whole Porza idea and movement was, of course, as many other things, then brought to an end by National Socialism, and it did not go on. Many of the Jewish members were persecuted or murdered. Porza disappears from the Berlin and German seas, becomes part of the European libertarian counterpart of the dictatorship. It goes on in Paris, where La Porza France experiences powerful relaunch with the refined organizations, and they go on over to even to Brazil and integrating many people engaged in the resistance in France and beyond. In this context, another building which gained historical importance also in the Canton Ticino, way up in a remote valley, in the Onsernone Valley, in the lost village up there in Comologno, is La Barca, which was basically an 18th century palace. Many of the Ticino families who made money abroad then built palazzi in mountain villages. So you find this peculiar situation in Ticino that you travel very high up into the mountains and suddenly you find a huge palazzo which does not connect in any way to the architectural tradition of the place. So anyway, this was the palazzo by the Remonda family. And you see the list of names, a few of the names who lived, worked, convened there, mainly during the 1930s and the war years. You can see here how remote it is. It is virtually the last village. The street ends there. From there on, and that's also important, we have a footpath which goes down to Domodossola then, so which had been a smuggler's route for centuries, we can assume, and it becomes an important route to bring people out of Italy, to bring Jewish people out of Italy, to bring partisans out of Italy. And the first stop that they had where they could find shelter was exactly La Barca. So this becomes a crucial function of this house during the war years. The enterprise was funded by a couple who had come from Zurich, Aline Valangin. She was from Lausanne, and in 1917 she gets married to Vladimir Rosenbaum. She worked as an assistant to C.G. Jung. She gets friendly with all the contemporary artists in Zurich, particularly with Hans Arp and Sophie Teuber. In the 20s, she is married to Walter Helbig, and they travel to Ascona, where, of course, already through the Monteverita people, there's some kind of an artist's colony. And in 29, with Rosenbaum, they purchase La Barca, where, so every summer in particular, they would hold these were not official gatherings like Borza, it was nothing written. They would just invite a few people, a few friends to come up and spend some time with them. You see the names Bill, Oppenheim, Max Ernst was there, and also writers Tucholsky, Ignazio Silone. And Valangin has also written about the village. They're very interesting books, testimonies, where she writes about the time, the people who came there, and also about the local population. Of course, also in particular about the importance of the place and the house in the years of the fascist Renaissance. Here we have her in a photo with her then lover, Ignazio Silone. This is Rosenbaum, who was one of the he was the main leftist lawyer in Zurich. So he would defend all the communists, all people who were accused of in political causes. He was very well known. And later on, in later years, he funded a very important library, quindi an antique library, an antique bookstore in Ascona. And their graves are still up in Comologno. We finish with yet another house who has had a similar history and destiny. We're again a bit later. We are in the late 60s. Now, the history actually starts with the house next to it. In 1917, we have an artist from Basel and her husband, Lisa Wenger, and her husband. They purchase a house in Carona, the Casa Costanza, which then becomes her home. She also works there. She's mostly famous and known, perhaps to many of you still, as a children's books creator and illustrator. She did this famous book, Der Jockeli soll Birli schüttle. So she did it there, and she worked there, but she did still lifes and portraits. And her daughter is then Ruth Wenger. She marries Hermann Hesse, who at the time lives in the village nearby. And the next generation, the great children of the Wengers, we find Meret Oppenheim. Meret Oppenheim, who then starts living in the Casa Costanza. At a certain point, in 68, together with her brother, she decides to purchase the palazzo next to it, the Casa Aprile. And this is in a very bad condition, the building at the time, so she needs some help to make it habitable. So she calls upon her grandson, who is Christoph Wenger. He's a 20-year-old student from the art school in Basel, and he comes with his friend David Weiss. So the two, they go there, and they get free lodging in exchange for doing work and fixing the house and making it habitable. As it happens in the spirit of the 1970s, in this whole idea of communal living. You know, we have in Munich the Kommune, we have in Berlin the Kommune, also in Zurich there are communes who are getting born, where young people live together in forms of communality which go beyond traditional family models. So Casa Aprile somewhat becomes artists' commune through the 1970s, where people come and go. So it's very free. Somebody knows somebody, somebody hears, oh, I can come and I can stay there. So we have Esther Altdorfer, Anton Bruin, Maria Gregor, Matthias Jenny is also, again, also literature. Matthias Jenny, he's a writer from Basel. who stays there. He one day hears that there's an old printing machine on sale in Lugano, so he goes down to the city, he buys this printing machine, he sets it up in the house, and at night he starts printing his what is considered the first Swiss underground literature journal, which he calls the Nachtmaschine, because the machine operates at night, publishing much to the annoyment of all the other residents of the house. A few examples of art coming from there, done there. There's an earlier painting by Meret Oppenheim, photo by Willi Spiller. We see David in his studio in the mid-1970s there in Corona. It's still cold, the heating of Opla. Something happened here, I don't know what. And we have another, Urs Lüthi is an important figure who brings in many people, who brings in many contexts, and he does this work there, self-portrait with landscape, where he mimics with his body and his blankets the silhouette of the landscape that you see when you look down from the village of Carona. On the right side, you have David Weiss. The ones from you, you can recognize Löwenplatz in the rain. So again, like with Rotblau, like throughout the whole century, you have this tradition that Ticino, of course, is a point of attraction of people who stay there for a certain time, who commune there, who share their creativity, but always, of course, in reference to another artistic center where they're basically coming from and for which they're also working, but they create this temporary kind of communal activities, very much so with the Carona group, because as there was not much to do, oftentimes in the evening they would just sit together around the table drinking wine and drawing, and everybody would doing like an extended Gaddafi exquisite. We still have the show in Lugano on Carona and the Casa Aprile. It's up till the end of this week, so if you hurry down from here, from Engadin to Ticino, you can still see it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Being an art historian myself, I obviously enjoy these kind of things where, so art history is also, we think of art history as a thing of cities, Zurich, Berlin, New York, Paris, but it's actually also, there's an alternative art history there, and it goes through landscapes. But let's ask or invite you to ask questions. We have one question. Oh, that's an easy one.
Oh, I don't know if you guys can hear me. Yeah, thank you, Tobia, for your very interesting presentation. I was wondering if you had any knowledge, if there was any knowledge about how the local communities responded to having this, let's call it artist residencies in their own small towns. Where did they feel there was, just some weird artists that come once a year? Or was there like more of a, I don't know, involvement in the community? Was it their own safe space, or what was the situation? Do we know anything about it?
It's an important question. We see Ticino has been a European thoroughfare since Neolithic times. All the main roads across the Alps go through there. In Middle Ages, through the present, where we have the Gotthard, which we have just seen. So the population there is used to strange and foreign people coming back and forth, but they also like to keep by themselves. So I would say, to sum it up, there's a huge amount of tolerance in Ticino, which certainly made these things also possible, because they know there are weird people, they live differently than we do, but so what? But of course they were not interested. Basically, in Carona there were problems in the 70s then with drugs and with terrorism, because of course also Timothy Leary stays in the house in 1972. Tim Leary, he's being persecuted in the US. He faces 95 years in prison in the United States for advocacy of LSD as a drug could be administered in psychotherapy. And he hides away in Switzerland. And Switzerland, interestingly, does not extradite him. So he stays in various places in Switzerland. So Garona also becomes, the house becomes one of the first Swiss hubs of this LSD culture, which of course does not help to integrate with the local people. And then from the mid-70s on, you have from Italy this, you know, it's the years of the Lotta Continua and for the Brigate Rosse. So these people, of course, they come and they hide in the, because as in the spirit of the time, it's an open house. You can just go there and say, somebody told me, I knew. So they also bring weapons, and problems are being created through that. And basically, I think also these combined problems with both the political terrorism and the drugs then finally lead to the end of the experiment in the late 1970s.
Okay. All the way back, then you and you. Okay, well, it's the other way around. Oh, wait. It comes after, sorry.
Okay. Okay. Hey, is there...
You. Sorry.
What's happening today? Is there something happening in this respect in Ticino today? Or is... We're talking out the past, but is there something going on in this way in Ticino nowadays?
I think what we talked about, this is thanks to Ticino being a very remote place still. Of course, we have from the 1880s, we have the Gotthard Tunnel, but it takes a long time and many, many years until Ticino gets culturally and also on the level of communications into the general tissue of Switzerland, what it is today. So I would say perhaps it lacks the remoteness now, even though you may still find some valley to start something and some house way up in the mountains, definitely.
Thomas?
Monte Verita.
Thomas is asking about Monte Verita.
That's an important question. There were no artists in Monte Verita. This is something that is really not known. Monte Verita starts with the anarchists who come there, Bakunin in the 1870s, 80s, followed by the whole Theosophische Bewegung and Anthroposophiken, Lebensreform. So it's the artists only come with World War I. And they stay in the village, in Locarno and Ascona. So Monte Verita is very important, bringing very many, let's say, dissidents from major European cities, also creating their own colony. Here I focus a little bit more on visual artists. But of course, as we have seen also with Brück and the Borza people, then these things all interconnect. Also Hermann Hesse, he was in touch with Gusto Gräser, and there's a diffusion of those ideas all over the region where many artists also get involved. I did leave Monte Verita out, actually, because we do not, in the real decades of the existence of the core of the Monte Verita movement and thoughts, we do not find the visual arts.
I was wondering, is any of these artist residencies still active, welcoming artists? And is there a heritage of the artist residencies in the Ticino? Which are the artist residencies now, like Fondazione Nairs, which we have here underneath Squall? Are there any residencies for artists in the Ticino now, or are some of these wonderful venues still welcoming artists?
Yeah, it's a good and unpleasant question. The answer is no, I think. Monte Verita has some fun now. Monte Verita does have some kind of artists, but none of these houses that I've talked about. So Casa Aprile is still privately owned, still by the Wenger family. The Bricks house have been sold, and there were two houses partially destroyed also, if I'm no, right, Villa Loveciano has never really been institutionalized, and La Barca is no longer also accessible. So none of those has become type, like it happened in Italy in the Casabaldi, that it finally then morphed into a permanent artist's residence. Unfortunately not.
I have a last question, which is going back to your current show at Hauser and Wirth, because I thought it was interesting. Can you say something about how a landscape, or in your research or in your curating or working with now on this show, how can you say something about the influence or the role in an artist's work that where the landscape plays an important role?
Well, landscape is perhaps a bit too narrow. With Alberto Giacometti is obvious. He's like bilingual. He speaks a Paris artistic language, and he speaks the language he learned with his father, Giovanni Giacometti, where he always returns when he's here and working here. There's no surrealist work done in the Grigio, sia in Stampa or in Maloya. So, and of course, Paris with all the surrealist objects, this is exclusively done in Paris. So somehow it's the funding, the foundation of everything he does. Then he moves away from it, encountering Cubism, tribal art, Brancusi, the surrealists in Paris. But basically then in the last years we find like a Versuno, so everything flows together again. So in the last years we basically cannot see a difference. So with Alberto, I always said it's like some things you don't, a boy does not tell his mother. So, and he did artwork that he did not like, would not mention when talking with his mother. This he did in Paris.
Thank you very much, Tobia. A big round of applause for Tobia. Amazing. Thank you.